we have an incredible group. I will tell you this, that I think we're in a really interesting moment right now for sports. The way that it's changing not by the year, not by the half decade. It's monthly right now. And this landscape is really incredible from a business perspective. And so we've got some of the most important and influential people in our panel today. And I'm going to start with the perhaps the least likely candidate to be in our panel. And that's Cam, Chamillionaire. You like Cam, right? Yeah, yes. All right. We're going with Cam. So if you don't know, Cam is a Grammy Award-winning musician. Yeah. By the way, I looked up a lot of your music. There's one that I'm playing on repeat right now.
Okay.
Had a platinum album, The Sound of Revenge. But I think, what most people might not know is that Cam is incredible in the business world. And this is a gentleman that has paved a path that perhaps people would least expect. He went on to do an entrepreneurship in residency at Upfront Ventures. And just speaking with him 10 minutes before this kicked off, I can tell you this is a man that listens, that learns, and is shaping the way people are doing business. And he's been one of the most influential in advising some of the entertainers and athletes in their investments. So a lot to come on that front. Chamillionaire, Cam. Got my paperwork here.
Okay. Take your time.
Appreciate that. Next, we got Jacquelyn Dahl. So Jacquelyn Dahl is founder and the CEO of One Up Sports Marketing. And she started this sports marketing firm because she started to recognize that there was a need in this space. And she started to do the work long before she was an agent and went on to a big agency, but now is managing some of the top talent in the industry. Patrick Mahomes, one of the biggest names, Alex Morgan, another one. That's a new acquisition for Jacquelyn. So she's got incredible experience in brand and marketing, and we're going to hear more from her. Then we've got, I'm going to get this right, Nneka Ogwumike.
Very close.
So close.
It's
and
okay.
I'm a broadcaster. I should be able to nail pronunciations. I failed. So Nneka was a power forward for the Los Angeles Sparks.
I am.
Back now.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, can you just you got to stand up because you are tall and impressive. Yeah, you're impressive. And also the head of the WNBA PA. She was the #1 draft pick out of college, and I'll forgive her for being a Stanford Cardinal, as I was a Santa Clara Bronco down the street.
Oh, I thought you were about to say you're a Cal Bear. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
No, it's okay. You got to all the Final Fours. No one cares about the little stepsister down the street. But currently, Nneka has been probably the instrumental in negotiating the 2020 agreement for the Players Association that improved conditions across the board for those athletes. So more to come on that. And then last, Jalen Rose. This is a gentleman that I actually met in Qatar watching the U.S. team play. Was it Iran?
Yeah, I got a passport.
Obviously, you probably know he's one of the University of Michigan's Fab Five. They went on to do big things. I think it was back-to-back NCAA titles. Now he's currently an ESPN studio analyst for First Take and Get Up.
Well, what had happened was I don't appear on First Take as much anymore. But I appear on every other.
I feel like there's a story there, and we're going to get there.
Yeah, but it's all love. It's all love.
And obviously played in the NBA Finals. Well, you're going to promote it, so we're going to hear more about that. But got to the finals in 2000. And he's also the founder of the Jalen Rose Foundation and Charitable Fund, which is really dedicated to changing the lives of undeserved youth. So pretty remarkable group. Everyone doing the work in the business field, but probably more importantly, looking to impact the lives of others. I think I want to start. I'm going to start with you, Nneka. I think in terms of what we're seeing in the sports landscape, There's a massive shift in leverage right now where individual athletes, entertainers can actually drive the business themselves. How have you seen, specifically in the WNBA, these athletes, grab a hold of that newfound leverage and utilize that opportunity now to monetize for themselves, but also for the collective?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say that, with the emergence of social media, certainly that amps the accessibility of athletes, and specifically in the WNBA, because we're a league of mostly Black women playing a male-dominated sport. We face a lot of stigmas and stereotypes that manifest in, what we see as like social and political activism. And so I think that kind of started where a lot of our players kind of like took that leverage, and eventually that led to, of course, the accessibility and the scope of following, which now players can use, to their own personal business advantages. And one thing that I think really drives the league for us is it's incredibly player-led and it's incredibly player collaborative. So like you mentioned the CBA. Granted, that's to protect our rights and to provide resources for us. But ultimately, the process by which we got there, the negotiating aspect of it, understanding the league side and the player side and having those tough conversations, me having to talk to the players, hear what they need. I'm talking to players that, I never thought that I'd ever talk to. Being president kind of gives you like an automatic relationship with each player. And so it's something that I really appreciate because I'm learning about things that I don't personally experience. I mean, we have moms in our league who don't have childcare services. And so like there's so many different things just by listening and being a collective and working to raise everybody's kind of status in the league that contributed to us kind of honing in on our like negotiation skills, which ultimately leads to us being able to be represented by like amazing agencies and being able to work on TV and get into tech. We're just now tapping into the investor side of things because those things are things that we have to seek ourselves. It's not like laid on a table like it is for men. So a lot of that growth, I think, really starts with the accessibility aspect and for people to be able to see a player like me and resonate with me or learn something new. And us being able to do that as a group is even more powerful.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about people putting themselves out there, right, to see the impact and the changes that they want to have within not just their league, but for their teammates, but on a broader sense. And I was thinking about you, Jacquelyn, representing Alex Morgan, Patrick Mahomes. And these are players that have to put themselves out there on social issues, like you mentioned, Nneka, at times. And what are those conversations? Because you also represent brands and make those relationships. What do those conversations sound like where it's the risk reward? And where are you valuing, or how are they conceptualizing, whether they put themselves out there or not? And what do brands think about that? And how much leverage those brands have?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, rather than talking about Patrick Mahomes or Alex Morgan, which, let's be honest, they're at a 1%, right? It's very hard to compare apples to apples when we're talking about the Super Bowl MVP. Michelle Wie said on her podcast a couple weeks ago that when she was in the prime of her career, that she was constantly told to be quiet and just be quiet. The sponsors won't like it if you speak up or talk about any of the injustices. But honestly, it's kind of wild what she said, that that changed when I had a daughter. I didn't want my daughter to be going through the same things and to be told to shush and be quiet. So I think Michelle Wie is going to continue to be an advocate for the LPGA. But you have to have women who are going to put their necks out for the rest of the girls. Alex Morgan, is at the forefront of equal pay. And if she's not doing it, nobody will. So I think it's in their duty to continue to push the game forward. And Patrick too. He's obviously doing it at a huge scale, but he is the leader of the NFLPA within the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's part of their duty as the leaders of their league, because they know that if they want to pave a path forward for young girls who are looking to to actually have a career and actually be able to afford rent. That's the only way, is that if Alex Morgan puts her foot forward on it.
Yeah, but they've got to be eyes wide open on the fact that brands might want to step back from him. I think in the NWSL in particular, when Alex Morgan stepped out alongside a teammate for players' conditions that we were seeing within the league, there was a real possibility that the players were ultimately to be punished for taking that stand against their employer, right? So are they discussing that and navigating that eyes wide open, or is it like, no, this is something we know we have to do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Alex can speak on it much better than I can. I didn't go through that emotional pull of what we should do. I've obviously never been on that biggest stage, but she felt it in her heart that was the best thing to do, right? So I think yes, there's a way to do it, but also what's to be known, yes, they're doing these things on social media and doing these things on the field, but there's real action happening behind the scenes. They're in the meetings with FIFA. They're in the meetings with their union. So this isn't just all for show. Now, they might have to go to social media to get it across the line if something needs to be said, or if Alex and Morgan needs to push, one tweet out to really cause some buzz. They're going to do that. Same with LeBron. Same with any of the leaders across the leagues. Don't let it be fooled that there's much bigger conversations happening, meetings and meetings with lawyers and lawyers. So, I mean, they're doing their part.
No doubt. And I think about actually the NBA, Jacquelyn, because you were also involved with the Players Association when you were playing. I mean, we think of the NBA as being this well-seasoned, mature league, right? But there's probably a lot of things that you guys have had to fight for. Can you recall things that you had to negotiate and that you were driving?
I think, and thank you guys for having me, and I respect and appreciate everybody on the panel. I think one of the things that tennis has to adopt and the players have to own is unity. The one thing that happens when you're in an individual sport, that you end up living in a silo, and you guys don't communicate about the things you like or dislike. You don't communicate about how much you're getting paid for appearances. You don't communicate how you're being treated by sponsors or what you do or don't like about the game, and you're not pulling together to make change. Everything that they just talked about was really people working together in order to make change. And one of the things that the NBA did, and it's not Major League Baseball, because Major League Baseball is a sport that doesn't have a salary cap. And one of the things that NBA players wanted to own is that we were going to have guaranteed contracts. And one of the things I've been very outspoken about is, and respectfully, I've always felt like the NBA treats the WNBA like indentured servants. Like we're not brothers and sisters. There's no way that they shouldn't have the best facilities. There's no way they should be flying first class. There's no way they should be flying private planes. And so in tennis, for example, there's an opportunity for these athletes to take their visibility and use social media and use their voices and come together and create that fist of power that now you can actually drive change. Because as an individual, you're not going to get the money, you're not going to get the visibility, you're not going to get the change that you actually want to see happen. So events like this are extremely important. I don't know if this has ever even happened in theory in tennis. But it's important that it does take place. But there's a responsibility from the players also. You can't be lazy. See, the one thing about NBA players, we about getting that bag. We'll sell whatever. For real. It happened when we were in college. We're going to wear long shorts. We're going to wear black shoes, black socks. Then they start all of a sudden making that $1 billion conglomerate. And we man, we should have trademarked that. And then AI came in, for example, started wearing wristbands and elbow pads. And they we can sell that and sell the jerseys and sell your likeness. So what I believe tennis players have to now start doing is being more visible. Doing more appearances, doing more social posts, being more vocal about the things you like and don't like. And unlike the NBA, you're an individual. See, in a team sport, you kind of have to your point, to Nneka's point, you kind of have to fall in with the collective. They have one representative for 15 players on the team. But in tennis, I represent me. So I can say what I want, do what I want, ride when I want, go when I want. So if we all working together in order to drive that change, it could be something that is a game changer in that sport, because their sport is elegant, it's beautiful, it's dynamic, it's graceful.
Yeah.
It's something that we all see as like, for somebody like me, like I consider myself a really good athlete, but I can't do a backhand. You know what I mean? I can't.
Yeah.
And so that is now something I think that there's an opportunity to take advantage of that I want to see players do.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because I'm thinking back to just the recent CBA negotiation that happened with U.S. Soccer, the men and the women. It was actually the first time that the two sides of our organization came together to get something done. And you go back in history, and we should have been talking sooner. We should have been talking louder. We should have used that collective energy to get things done earlier. But, you know, to your point, that it's a really good thing for you guys to think about, and how you guys can unify and affect the change that you want to see happen. You actually made me think about something real quick. If you guys weren't playing basketball, and I know you played tennis in college, I believe, what sport would you have played? Just quick answer. I want to hear quick.
I would have been a volleyball player. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
I would have played soccer.
Yes, one for the win.
I wish I was in the NBA.
I didn't have a second sport.
Nothing love.
You made
just
it
said you
work.
love tennis.
Well, here I grew up in an era where whatever season it was, we played that sport.
Okay.
So when it was like, okay, basketball season, Jalen, your left hand, you killing us and all of that. But now it's football season. What you gonna do?
Yeah.
So I played football. I was a defensive end.
I said quick, Jalen.
I know, but I'm just. It's not. I gave you an answer. I didn't have a secondary sport, and I'm telling you why. Like football season, I was a defensive end. I played a little bit. I wasn't that good or whatever. I played baseball. I used to think I was Rod Carew. I used to hold the bat like him, and all of that because I was a lefty. And so I didn't have a secondary sport.
Well, maybe Cam could advise you, because I hear he's a good advisor.
Yes.
Cam,
is.
Cam, you've
and
been
Cam
doing
got bars too.
That's true. You've been doing some work with the PA before and helping advise on investment strategies, and I was just thinking back also to my career, and if I had that influence in my life early on, and how important that access is to someone that can, you know, kind of shape your investment strategies, but also doing it at a time when a lot of athletes might be in the prime of their earning career. I know you'd argue differently based on what you're doing now, but, you know, how important is that? And what would you say to a lot of these tennis players right now in terms of investment?
Well, I feel like it's personal for me, because when I was in the music industry, you know, they got this thing in basketball where they tell the players to shut up and dribble. I don't know what the equivalent of that is to a rapper, because the rapper is like, maybe just shut up and rap, I guess. You know, they just want us just to rap all day, and they don't really, everybody's really in a box. And at the end of the day, there's always these stats that show you that majority of pro players go broke after leaving the league. You've seen them all over the place. But I wonder how many rappers go broke, because the industry is designed to train us to spend money frivolously and buy all these rims and jewelry and all this type of stuff. So while I was in the music industry, I started seeing all these opportunities, and it started to unlock something for me. There's this thing called investing, and everybody that's wealthy in the world does it. But a lot of people in my world do not do that. So now I leave the music industry, I start to go to tech conferences, and I unlock something where I'm at a tech conference, and if I'm going to a rap concert, I see 1,000 people paid $40, $50 to get in. At a tech conference, 1,000 plus people paid $400, $1,000 to get in. Why would they be paying that much money? Because there's information and relationships on the other side. So I started going to those places and started seeing venture capitalists, startups, all of this opportunity. And when I'm going, I go to courtside games with E40, and I'm sitting there, and one time I said to E40, like, yo, man, We can't just be like a transaction here. The guys that you just walk up to and you just give high five because we make music. Everybody sitting courtside, they all invest. So I would start talking to every single person and realize, man, these people are in SpaceX, they're in all these companies, and then they start to let you into their homes. They start to give you all these relationships, and then you start to unlock all this value. And what you're essentially doing is planting seeds that eventually grow into trees for your family. Like, why wouldn't we want that? So I don't think that they look at athletes or musicians as the type of people to be able to do that. And I felt like it was personal for me. I was like, I'm going to go out into the ecosystem and try to give people as much information as possible, because I believe that people aren't doing it because it's intimidating. It feels very scary when you start talking about investing. But ultimately, it's spending what you can afford to lose. We do it every day. We see Valentine's commercials that tell us to buy all this chocolates and all this nonsense. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make us money. We buy cool shoes because it's an investment. We think people are going to like us. It gives us some kind of value. So now, when you can spend money in places that eventually can make you back a return, then I just think we all have to be doing it. Athletes, musicians, everybody. And I'm like super passionate about that.
Well, investment right now is changing, right, in sports altogether. And Jacquelyn, I'm really curious your perspective on what you're seeing from brands right now and how they want to invest in the space and try to bring more quality to it. I'll use Ally Bank as Ally Financial as a really good example. They recently said that they were going to sponsor or invest equal dollars into sports, 50% men's, 50% women, because as you know, the women are at a massive deficit in that category. Are you seeing brands now start to take up more positions from moral perspectives, or are they looking at it from straight up business perspective? We actually believe we're going to have greater return in women's sports than we are men's.
It's a tricky question because I still think we're a really long way away from that. I think it's really cool and sexy right now to say you support women, but there's a lot of talk and a lot less action. Yep. I was actually going to ask you because I would love to know, in those rooms of investors and opportunities, are there any female athletes or female celebrities who are giving those same opportunities? Because I do find it interesting that a lot of the brands that we work with Patrick Mahomes and any of the other male athletes I work with, they're targeting the Jalen Roses of the world, the Patrick Mahomes, the Christian McCaffreys. There's about 10 NFL players that are invested in a lot of the same things. But no females. I'm like, where is this at? Now, Naomi has done an incredible job, and Stuart and her team have built, something incredible there, but that's new. I was at an event with Taylor Rooks with Buzzer, and she was so hyped that she was even brought into the conversation for Series A. She's like, Series A, like so proud, loud, like this is one of the best spokespeople for this brand, but like none of these female athletes or female celebrities are really being brought these opportunities. So I say this, yes, I think like we're getting there, and there are brands who are, oh, we'll throw Sabrina in a State Farm commercial. That's awesome. Okay, but what else are you doing? What else? Like, why are we not talking to every single team in the same way of the multiple NFL athletes that you're talking about? So I will say it's moving. We're moving in the right direction, but there's a lot.
What is the answer when you ask them that?
Working on it. I mean, like, it's a lot of the same, and there really isn't an answer. It's the same thing with why do less people watch women's sports? I don't know. I don't understand. These are the best of the best in the business of what they do. I don't think that there's, a direct answer, but I do think like what I like to point to and are the investors who are actually investing in women's sports, Chris and Angie Long in Kansas City, like two of the most incredible people who are actually like walking the walk. They are building a state-of-the-art facility in Kansas City for the KC Current, and that just doesn't happen across the league. Like it's just not happening. Obviously, Angel City has an incredible list of female investors, and it's becoming very cool, but we need to get our men to continue to support. And I mean, like Patrick also invested in the NWSL, and that's a great step forward. Now it's, again, maybe that gets other NFL athletes interested in supporting the female soccer players in their city. So it's just action, more action, less talking about it. Like, it's very cool that you wear an orange hoodie that says WNBA on it, but what have you done for women today?
Right.
Amen.
Drop the mic. It's funny because I'm a part of the group that's bringing NWSL to the Bay Area, and our lead investor is, in fact, Sixth Street Capital. So it's going to be the first, private equity into our space, actually, if everything gets over the finish line. And I know WNBA just recently had a $75 million raise. And so I was curious about how you guys are thinking about utilizing those funds to grow your sport, to create stability, yes, but to grow it.
To be transparent, we still haven't been informed about how that $75 million is being used. Not trying to call anyone out, but we've asked many times, and we haven't gotten an answer. But also to what Jacquelyn was saying, like, it's very true. Like, it's sexy to say that you're supporting women in sport. It's very performative. And then for the little that women's sports are getting, it's even less for black women. So it's like, I love seeing the NWSL is expanding, but like, no one is doing the same thing for the WNBA because we're mostly black. And that's just, it's reflective of what the investment that people put into black and brown people in this country. And so it's just something you have to say out loud, whether it makes people uncomfortable or not, but it's just the truth. And we a lot of times as black women set the culture, but the culture does not feed us back. And so a lot of what we do is about advocating for ourselves. I mean, to the point where we flipped a Senate seat and everyone's like, whoa, and that was it, you know, like, and it's more so kind of like, okay, well, like, next election, what do you guys, like, the question I always get is, what's next, thinking that we know all of this, you know, political, I guess, activity that's happening in this world, social activity, and like, we just seem prepared for it, but it's because we're born, as women, we're born in the resistance. As black women, we're born in the resistance, so we always gotta stay ready. I really admire what you do because like you saw your company way before anyone else saw it. And I'm sure along the way there are people that are like, oh yeah, okay, sure, like whatever. But the only person that was gonna make it happen was you. And that's kind of how we always have to operate in a world. And then it's compounded by being black in this country as well and a black woman in sport. So that investment is something that we just have decided we have to put it into ourselves until the right people come along and say, hey, we want to expand. I mean, we've been talking about expansion since I came into the league. I'm hoping at least by like the next 2 or 3 years, we'll have a team in the Bay, maybe a team in Portland, a team in Toronto, because that's kind of like the buzz of the conversation. But like Jacquelyn said, you know, it's like you kind of just get the same placeholders every time like these conversations come up. It's the same thing that happened like after 2020. All of a sudden I was asked, like, I mean, I can't tell you how many diversity, equity, and inclusion panels I was asked to be on, but those same companies that asked me to speak have literally done nothing different from the reckoning that they experienced that year. And it's just all about what's hot, you know? And we're in a league and we're women in this world who exist that always have to not only look out for ourselves, but also look out for others. And a lot of times we end up looking out for ourselves afterwards. But I think like what the WNBA does right now is like, hey, we're gonna look out for ourselves. And we want to go where we're wanted. We don't necessarily want to seek investment and say, hey, we want private jets tomorrow. Like that's not what we're saying, but we're a league of women who almost everyone has their degree, and we understand, okay, for example, this charter situation, people say, oh, you guys don't make as much. First of all, the returns that we're having right now, 25 years, now 27, going into 28, is way more than when the NBA was 28. But because we're living in such a modern world, people like to compare an almost 80-year-old league to, would you compare an 80-year-old to a 25-year-old? Like, no, in real life, like, it's just different. But we're actually exponentially growing in a way that people don't see just because they haven't educated themselves about history.
It's so funny you say that because I learned the other day that in the 70s, NBA used to put their games on after college games so they could start to generate their fan base. And at least naively, I always thought that there was just that natural affinity between the fans and the NBA and that you guys had to grow there. And in fact, WNBA is ahead of that trajectory. NWSL is ahead of that trajectory. And so, yes, we need to speed it up, but we're sitting in a good spot. And I think, you know, we need to continue to communicate that reality with the investment world, with the fans, and to continue to grow to that point. I mean, I think when I'm curious too, for you to follow up, but on building that personal brand. I mean, Jalen, you did it so well while in your playing career, and then you've also leveraged it in your post-playing career. What was key for you to recognize, I think, during that initial phase where a lot of these tennis players may be, and then also how should they be thinking about that if perhaps, tennis doesn't work out for them?
Well, basically, as an athlete, only few people can decide when they retire.
Right.
Otherwise, the game retires you. And the turnover in the NBA is extremely volatile. There are up to 450 jobs. But 25% of those players, which is around 80 players that are in the league right now, won't be in the league next year.
Wow.
So if you get a chance at the end of this season and then the start of next season, kind of look at a list. And you'd be like, wow, such and such not in the league no more? They're really young because the turnover happens so fast. So as a player, what you have to do is always plan on what's next. And that's something that we don't like to do in life. It could be life insurance. Sometimes people don't want to talk about it. It's like, I'm going to live till I'm 100. Well, no, you're not. That's something that you have to talk about. And it's the same thing for planning on what's next. And usually your visibility is at its highest while you're playing. So people are more apt to return our messages when we're winning Grammys, when we're working with Patrick Mahomes, when we're the president of WNBA, versus when we're not. Then you kind of become that message people look at and may return a few days later, a week later, or not return. And so as a player, you got to know that, you got to own that, and you got to be building. I think I quote the great American philosopher Rick Ross, right? He said, appreciate your position while plotting your promotion.
There we go.
Right? So while you're playing, you got to be figuring out how I can leverage what he just said. It's one thing to be sitting courtside. It's another thing to be on the court. Right? So if you're on the court, you got to be managing those relationships. When I played, the owners didn't necessarily fraternize with the players. And therefore, they didn't introduce you to business opportunities. It was like, we used to look back and be like, man, Dr. Jerry Buss looking out for Magic. That's what everybody else used to say. You didn't see Larry Bird end up with the Celtics. You didn't see Isaiah Thomas end up with the Pistons. You didn't see Michael Jordan end up with the Bulls. That didn't happen. They had to go elsewhere to reinvent themselves. So as a player, you got to understand, while I'm performing, this is my apex to take advantage of these relationships, but also plan and strategize what's next. And if you're not doing that, you're foolish, because the game is going to end you, especially in a sport like basketball and definitely in a sport like tennis. Like in tennis, you get 30, you're a senior citizen. That's how they treat you, right? Like we see Serena, we see Venus, we see people crack the glass ceiling. But for the most part, you're a young person. You played this game your entire life. Now you're hope to be 30, maybe 35. So now what are you about to do the next 20, 30, 40 years of your life? You got to be planning and strategizing for that.
Yeah, so you would argue that while you need to monetize your brand and the current landscape, probably, Cam, the bigger picture is to actually be being an entrepreneur of your brand and thinking about how you're going to leverage the relationships. I keep hearing that word time and time again. I know it to be true where I sit, and I don't think I understood it when I played, quite frankly. And can you just tell, these young athletes and talk to them about what that means? You talked about family. You talked about some acronyms that you've used in your advisement and investing. And can you tell them about what that means to honor those relationships?
So I believe that this is something that needs to be baked into your DNA. Y'all hear this all the time. It almost is like some preacher is preaching this stuff, and you're like, forget that. When my name is, it used to be Chamillionaire. That was my rap name. and I changed my name to Chamillionaire at one point. So everybody sees the millionaire in my name. But I didn't add millionaire because it was CHA million. I added AIRE. That is about information and relationships. Because I knew that if I get the information and relationships, I would become millionaire. And that's what happened. Think about that. When I tell people that, they're like, no way, when you were a kid, you were thinking about that. I used to draw comic books, so I would draw this lizard logo because there was never a black superhero. There's Batman, there was Superman, and I drew that lizard and turned myself into that superhero. And my special power was information and relationships. So when I went through the music industry, I consumed every relationship information. I knew how to get my contract better than the next person's contract. That's why I can be sitting here making money as a musician, even though I haven't put out a song in a minute, because I have a good contract. So when I tell this to people, they just think I'm like crazy or something. I'm like, okay, I'm just telling you what I did. So now, if you think about the opportunity for an athlete, right now, everybody is telling you that while you're on the top of the charts, while you're on the top of the court, while you're on the TV, that's the opportunity. But I think what that does is intimidate all the 99% of the 1%. The people that aren't LeBron, they feel like it's only reserved for those other people, and they'll talk to an agent and rely on them and say, yo, get me this, and they just want more and more stuff. But the truth is, you can unlock the value add that you have for all these companies that have opportunity. You have a special skill set. You learned how to, train yourself throughout, childhood to adult, and now you understand about health and fitness. You understand about working out. Think about how many tech startups there are that need that value. There are a bunch of nerds that are just building stuff, and they need you. Right? So when you get into those rooms and you start to talk to them, they unlock all these opportunities, and that ends up being in the form of equity. And now that equity could end up being something that makes you a lot of money. These companies raise $5 million, then they raise $20 million, they raise $200 million, and they're gonna spend it somewhere. You want them to give it all to Mark Zuckerberg on Facebook ads? Or they can do it with you. So I tell people that to go unlock those relationships with these startups, with these companies, you don't need, no disrespect, I feel like the agents are gonna help, but I feel like they can go in and just be a personality and start to open up these relationships with people and let them know that they're open for business. These people will reach out to them. They don't always have to transact. You don't always have to invest. You can just build the relationships, and it will end up being fruitful for you. You just have to do the work,
So don't get it twisted. I 100% agree with you. I would much rather my client be hitting up a brand or an investor or anybody directly, as opposed to me trying to make that phone call. They don't want to hear from me. Right. They're hearing from me on 50 other things. They much rather want to hear from you, whether that be a DM. Like, I think that's honestly like how to get in the room. I think that's the biggest conversation. So like, yes, I represent Patrick Mahomes and Alex Morgan, which they can get in a room with these type of people. My husband, David Dahl, is an MLB player. He's been in the league for 6 years. He's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's been in the league. He's part of a union. But like, I think the big question for the masses of these leagues and these athletes is, how do you get in the room with those people? Right. How do you open those doors? And honestly, I don't know if you would say this, but your union. Yeah. I mean, like, that's part of it. I understand that not everybody has the biggest agents in the business that can make a quick phone call and be on the line with Nationwide, but you have your union who is working with hundreds of brands regularly and can help make those introductions and help make those phone calls and set up resources for after your career. I mean, I can't tell you how often I'm sending the link for the NFLPA to our players of like, hey, look at all these resources you have. You can go and intern at Fanatics for a month. Right. You can go sit with Michael Rubin and learn from him for like, these are opportunities that are happening while you're an athlete. And unfortunately, like you said, once you don't have that jersey on anymore, once you're not on the court anymore, they're not really answering your phone calls. So take advantage. Yeah, exactly.
Well, do you think SPACs, VCs, and PE coming into the sports landscape now is going to forever change the industry? Do you think it's actually going to accelerate this opportunity for the athletes? It's my last question, I promise.
I think that, man, the elephant in the room, man, is that this world is not very inclusive. When you're in the music industry, when you're in, you're athlete, you see the talent, but the money is coming from a group of people that is normally white and male, and they often don't see the opportunity in the talent like they should. And luckily for me, I don't have a boss. So I run up in all these buildings and I talk kind of reckless to people and tell them, hey, you kind of need to look at that a little differently, right? And it kind of works. But if you look at the stats, the data backs me up, because less than 2% of venture capital goes to the black emerging fund manager. Less than 2% goes to the black startup founder. Women, they get like 0.00004% or something like that. That's crazy. That is crazy. If you think about the demographic shift of the United States and the way the demographics look, how the heck is the dollars going in not reflecting? And that's because a system has been designed to keep it that way. So now when people like me come in and start to say, hey, you need to look at this a little different, it kind of rubs people the wrong way. But the truth is, more people have to do that. Matter of fact, white males have to do that, because that's the only way it changes. Because the truth is, there should be way more capital going to these places. And if you really think about it, in the whole time I've been in venture, I haven't seen a time where over 5% went to like minorities. That's crazy. And nobody really says anything about it. All this stuff is really just diversity theater. We saw post George Floyd what happened. Everybody just put up stuff on Instagram, and I'm sitting there like, what the heck? So now I feel like it's hard for me to go back and just rap and tell people to stand on the stage and wave your hands side to side, because somebody's got to run up in that boardroom and tell Verizon or whoever that's spending $9 billion, they got to put it in some other places. Because if you don't, all that money ends up going somewhere. The truth is, all these other people, they got an opportunity. It wasn't always they were deserving of it. Somebody felt like they deserved it. There's a kid, I think his name is Austin Russell. He's one of the youngest billionaires. I went to his house, huge house. He just, launched a company, but he got a start from a guy named Peter Thiel, who decided, you drop out of high school, I'm gonna give you this money, and gave him some money, and then now he's one of the youngest billionaires. And he was telling me that story, and where is that opportunity for most people? They're seeing something special in somebody and just taking a chance on them. Most people that start a company, they fail. Most of them do, but they keep on going back and giving more capital. So now when you're talking about an NBA league, I remember there's a team getting sold, like the New York Liberty or at some point, or maybe it was some New York team in the WNBA.
Yeah,
and
the Liberty.
Yeah, and it was going around to everybody. Man, if you would have heard some of the stuff that people were telling me, I was getting mad. Like, I was one of the people on the team. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why are y'all talking like this? It's because sometimes the other person that looks a certain way, that looks like Mark Zuckerberg, they see something special in him, they'll go give him the money, he'll go screw it up, and then over here it's like, they put every single excuse in the book and they keep on moving the goalpost. Mm-hmm. And I just think as society, it's just a problem that we don't talk about. It's kind of uncomfortable for people, but that has to change, and that's why I'm here running up in these buildings. Every day I walk in there with my hat backwards, just like I look with jewelry on, because I want to normalize this. If I try to dress like somebody else, then I'm trying to be something I'm not. So, it's the hard fight, but we got to keep on doing it, and eventually it'll change, I
mean, it's all about the accessibility. I feel like it always comes back to it, whether we have access to it or others have access to us. That's really what it boils down to. And it's the representation as well. We've been talking about this for the past hour, and you guys, when you were talking about obviously having us in the room, you're right. When we were negotiating the CBA, and it got to a point where okay, we would send our lawyer, and then the league would send their lawyer, and then one day it was just we just sat in front of Kathy, and we got so much done just because now you're looking me in my face and telling me how you value me. It's much harder to say no to the actual person that's going to be affected by your decision. And in the same way, when it comes with athletes, it's always the shiny toy. When you first get into the league, it's all about, they tell you merch, and you're swimming in merch, and you think that this is the best. I'm fly, I'm walking out. But do you have a mortgage, or are you paying rent? You know what I'm saying? And those are the things that we learn through having accessibility to resources. Now we're getting into VC, just the tip of it, because we now have been taught about the word equity. Yeah. So now, even if you're not in VC, you can get equity in a brand that wants to represent you. So instead of getting base comp, no. You're going to get a percentage of what this brand brings back to serve as a representation of that brand. And that's stuff that you can figure out either on your own with an agency, with people that look like you that are doing these types of things, with people who've been there and didn't have those opportunities. But most especially the PTPA, for them to put this together and have this panel is putting players in a position that it's already putting you ahead. These are things that we did not have, that we did not know when we started off. And I think that it's remarkable to be a part of this, and I'm very grateful to be a part of a PA as well that is working to do this for its players, because at the end of the day, we have to feed ourselves in order for us to be able to have a seat at this table. So I'm just really grateful. I learned so much on this panel. And I'm glad that I had accessibility to everybody up here today. So yeah.
I think it's also important to talk about, we keep talking about team sports and like not acknowledging that tennis is an individual sport. So this is like 10x important to have somebody to lean on. I can't imagine if I was playing on the tour and how do I know if this deal, somebody, obviously you have agents, and I've heard that, some of these players on the tour don't have agents, but it's so important to either A, build a team, and many of you are doing that with your agents and financial advisors and maybe content managers and things like that. But if you don't have that, or if you're not there yet, that is what a union is for. That is what PTPA is for, is somebody to lean on, someone to gut check, like, hey, is this normal? Hey, should I, be in the red every single, I don't know. Like, there's like all these questions that you just maybe are asking some of your colleagues and things like that, but it's much better when you can go directly to the source.
And also there's strength in numbers, to your point.
Right.
A lot of times you don't know until you start to communicate with one of your fellow athletes and they start to tell you, hey, my match was at 5 o'clock, but then I showed up and I didn't play till 8 o'clock. Like, some of these matches be happening at 4 in the morning. Like, I be trying to watch. I'm like, I'm tired. So imagine being an athlete if you felt like your game was going to start at one certain time, and you show up, you stretch, you prepare, you invite your family, you do all of that, and it doesn't start at that time. But when you operate in isolation, it's hard to get that change. And one of the things that I noticed, and of course, agents and managers can do an amazing job for you. They've done an amazing job a lot of times for me. But I'll never forget thinking some of the most important conversations that happen in my career, I'm not on the phone. And you just said it, how when you guys were sitting right in front of the person you needed to deal with, you got more done. Imagine if you never did that, it wouldn't have never got done. And so that's what this is about, and hopefully you guys take this opportunity to band together and make that change.
No, yeah, thank you. I think one thing that I would leave the group with is, until you can get into one of Cam's SPVs, there is actually an SPV called the
You're all
Players
welcome.
Impact. You got them all?
Everybody
Go
good.
find Cam after, everyone. But there is an SPV called the Players Impact, and it's for athletes that do want to get involved in investments at the seed level, Series A, Series B. But it's a great opportunity, so I would definitely check that out, and hopefully we can help connect you to that. But I would just say, incredible group. Started off with that, even more apparent now. You guys, what you've done in your respective spaces, so incredibly impressive and really valuable, obviously, not just for what you're doing in your sport, for yourself individually, but how you guys are changing the sports landscape as we know it, how we're changing, thinking about investing as athletes and controlling our brand, controlling our narrative, and making sure, I think the big takeaway I heard tonight is keep those relationships. Get yourself in the room, own that relationship, own what is in front of you, and I think we're going to be in a better spot. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.